They say the truth will set you free, but sometimes the truth detonates like a bomb at a $10,000 Christmas dinner, and I was holding the trigger. My father's voice still echoes in my head. "Nicole, you're not even half your sister. Honestly, we hoped you'd amount to something." The entire table, the pastor, the neighbors, my sister's colleagues, erupted in laughter. My mother, ever the performer, added with a pitying smile, "Some people never reach their potential." I was the invisible daughter, the one who did the dishes while my sister got dance lessons, the one who sacrificed everything and received nothing. For 35 years, I played my role perfectly, the failure, the disappointment, the family charity case. But here's what they didn't know. That crystal chandelier above their heads, I paid for it, along with the mortgage, the medical bills, the property taxes, and every single expense for the last 8 years, $412,000. While they paraded around pretending to be the perfect family, I was the ghost in the machine funding their entire illusion. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Hidden in my purse was a brown leather notebook, my mother's closely guarded secret for decades. Inside were the receipts of a crime that started when I was just 8 years old. A plan so calculated, so cruel, that when I finally revealed it, grown adults would cover their mouths in horror. So when my father called me a failure in front of everyone who mattered to them, I stood up, straightened my shoulders, and asked one simple question that would destroy everything they'd built on my back. Since I'm such a failure, who paid for this $10,000 dinner? The room went dead silent. And then the truth began to pour out, twist after devastating twist, until there was nothing left of their perfect family but ashes and accountability. My name is Nicole Chavez, and I'm 35 years old. I run a successful logistics software company with clients across the country. But if you asked my parents what I do for a living, they'd tell you I push papers for some government contractor. They have no idea I've been funding their entire life for the past 8 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story doesn't start with my success. It starts with a little girl doing laundry while her sister played outside. I was 11 the first time I realized I was invisible. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I remember standing in our cramped laundry room, sorting whites from colors the way Mom had taught me. Through the window, I could see Marissa, 8 years old and golden in the sunlight, twirling in the backyard, pretending to be a ballerina. Mom stood on the porch, clapping and cheering like Marissa had just performed at Lincoln Center. I'd finished my homework, cleaned the kitchen, and now I was tackling the mountain of dirty clothes. My hands were red from the hot water, and my back ached from reaching into the washing machine. When I finally walked outside, grass-stained jeans still in my arms, Mom barely glanced at me. "Nicole, don't interrupt. Marissa is practicing." That became the soundtrack of my childhood. Nicole is strong. She doesn't need as much attention. Nicole can handle it. Nicole understands. I did understand. I understood that no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the shadow to Marissa's light. When I won the Academic Excellence Award in 8th grade, my parents didn't come to the ceremony. Marissa had a dance recital the same night, her third one that year, and of course that took priority. My English teacher handed me the certificate with a sad smile, and I took it home to an empty house. I hung it on my bedroom wall where no one would see it next to all the other awards that never made it to the family photo wall. Maybe if I'm perfect enough, they'll finally see me, I used to whisper to myself at night, so I kept trying. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, the perfect daughter who never complained, never caused trouble, never asked for anything. But perfection, I learned, was just another word for useful. I was 15 when they asked me to help with some paperwork. It was a Saturday morning, and Dad called me into the kitchen with that tone he used when he needed something. Mom stood beside him, both of them wearing smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Honey, we need you to sign some documents," Dad said, sliding papers across the table. "Just routine stuff for the house. We're refinancing to fix the roof." I looked at the papers covered in tiny print and official-looking seals. I was 15. I trusted them completely. "Just sign here, sweetheart." Mom pointed to several spots marked with little sticky arrows. "You're helping the family." Of course I signed. That's what good daughters did, right? They helped their families. I didn't think about those papers again for 12 years. At 27, I'd finally saved enough for a down payment on a small condo. Nothing fancy, just a place that would be mine where I could hang my own awards on the walls. I sat across from the mortgage officer, practically vibrating with excitement, ready to start my adult life. The officer's face changed as she scrolled through her computer screen. The smile disappeared. "I'm sorry, but your credit score is... It's 520. There's a major delinquency from 2015. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. I was 15 in 2015. I didn't have any credit cards. But there it was, in black and white, a credit line for $42,000 opened with my Social Security number when I was a sophomore in high school. 12 years of missed payments, late fees, and damage I'd never known existed. I drove to my parents' house in a daze. When I confronted them, Dad didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "We needed it, Nicole. The business was struggling. You should be grateful you had a roof over your head." Mom just nodded. "It's not like it affected you until now. You were fine all these years." That was the moment something fundamental shifted inside me. I wasn't their daughter. I was a resource to be exploited, a tool with a Social Security number. I spent the next 3 years paying off that debt dollar by agonizing dollar watching my dreams of homeownership dissolve into someone else's mistakes. And I never told anyone. The shame was too deep, too personal. How do you explain that your own parents committed identity theft against you when you were a child, but the debt wasn't the only secret they kept? I'd always known about my mother's notebook. She'd had it for as long as I could remember, a brown leather journal with a small brass lock. When I was 8, I'd found it on the coffee table and reached for it out of curiosity. Mom had moved so fast, snatching it away with a sharpness that made me flinch. "This is private, Nicole. Don't touch things that don't belong to you." I learned to pretend I didn't see it, even though she carried it everywhere tucked in her purse or hidden in her nightstand drawer. Years later, when I was 33, I took Mom to an emergency doctor's appointment for high blood pressure. In the chaos of check-in, her purse tipped over. The notebook tumbled out, pages splaying open. I reached down to help gather her things, and that's when I saw it. My name, written in her careful handwriting. And next to it, Nicole, useful pays, well-reliable income source. There were columns of dates and amounts, plans written in her neat script. My stomach lurched. "That's private." Mom's voice was sharp with panic as she grabbed it back. "Stop being nosy, Nicole." But I'd seen enough. That notebook wasn't just a diary, it was a ledger, and I was an entry in someone else's accounting book. I should have confronted her then, but part of me still wanted to believe I was wrong, that there was some reasonable explanation, that my mother didn't view me as a commodity. Last week an envelope arrived at my apartment, my mother's handwriting on the front, just my name. No return address needed. I knew her loops and slants like my own heartbeat. Inside was a single card. The message was written in her perfect penmanship, "Don't ruin Christmas this year." Not, "We're looking forward to seeing you." Not, "We love you." Just a warning, a command, a reminder of my place. I sat on my couch staring at those 5 words and felt something inside me crack wide open. Not break that had happened years ago. This was different. This was the sound of the last thread of hope finally snapping. They had no idea what was coming. But I did. And I was done being invisible. But before I get to that Christmas card and what it set in motion, you need to understand how I got here. How the invisible daughter became the woman funding her parents' entire existence without them even knowing it. I was 29 when my life imploded in the best possible way. I'd been working at a mid-sized tech corporation, finally building some financial stability after paying off that $42,000 debt my parents had saddled me with. Then Sarah, a 23-year-old junior developer, came to me in tears. Our department VP had been cornering her, making comments about her body, touching her shoulder in ways that made her skin crawl. I reported it. I documented everything. I stood up for her. 2 weeks later, HR called me in. The woman across the desk didn't even look me in the eye. "Nicole, you're causing problems for a valued team member. We're going to have to let you go." The VP kept his job. Sarah quit 3 days after I was fired. and I walked out of that building with a box of my belongings and $3,200 in my bank account. My apartment lease was ending in 60 days. No family to fall back on, no safety net. I sat in my car in that parking lot and cried until my eyes burned. Then I wiped my face, looked at myself in the rearview mirror, and said out loud, "No one's coming to save you, so save yourself." I taught myself to code, YouTube tutorials at 2 in the morning, Codecademy courses on my laptop at coffee shops where I'd nurse a single cup for 4 hours. I built a logistics management software from scratch, something I'd wished existed at my old job. My first pitch to a potential client ended with the man saying, "Come back when you have a real company, honey." I came back 6 months later with 5 paying customers and a working product. He signed the contract, but I wouldn't be here at all if it weren't for Mrs. Ramirez. I met her during those brutal early months when I was working 16-hour days out of coffee shops, living on instant ramen and stubbornness. She owned a small grocery store in a neighborhood where rent was cheap and questions were few. One day she simply walked over to my corner table and said, "Mija, you're here every day. You need a proper place to work." She gave me a corner of her stockroom, wouldn't take rent, just said, "Someone helped me once, now I help you." 3 months later, she showed me a photograph so old the edges had yellowed. 2 young women arms around each other laughing at the camera. One was clearly Mrs. Ramirez, maybe 30 years younger. The other I recognized from the single photo I had hidden in my wallet. "Your grandmother Elena," Mrs. Ramirez said softly. "My best friend for 40 years. My hands started shaking. My grandmother had died when I was 18, shortly before I left home. We'd been close in the stolen moments when my parents weren't watching. She told me about you when you were 10 years old. She said, 'Ramirez, if anything happens to me, watch over Nicole. They're going to push her away, and she'll need someone.'" Mrs. Ramirez's eyes filled with tears. "She made me promise. I've been looking for you for 10 years. 10 years. Since I was 19 and ran from that house with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart. Mrs. Ramirez invested $30,000 in my startup. Your abuela left this with me. She saved for years just for you. She also gave me an envelope sealed with wax, my grandmother's handwriting on the front, for Nicole when she's ready to fight. I didn't open it then. I wasn't ready. But I kept it close. That $30,000 became the foundation of everything. Within 2 years, I had a contract with Amazon Logistics, then smaller e-commerce companies, then more. My company's revenue hit $100,000, then $500,000, then crossed $2 million annually. I bought 5 rental properties, invested in 2 other startups. My savings account had more money than my parents had seen in their entire lives. I was making 6 figures monthly. And I told them I processed paperwork for government contracts. Technically true. But they pictured me in a cubicle, a nobody clerk, grateful for a steady paycheck. My dad once said, "At least the government takes care of you since you couldn't make it in the real world." Meanwhile, I was paying their mortgage, $2,800 a month, plus utilities $400, property tax $1,000, and another $1,000 in allowance so they could maintain their lifestyle. $5,200 a month, every month, for 8 years. They thought it was government assistance, some program for low-income seniors. They had no idea it was their failure daughter keeping them afloat. Last Tuesday, the bank called. "Ms. Chavez, your scheduled transfer of $5,200 has been sent." I stared at my grandmother's sealed envelope on my desk, at my mother's Christmas card with its cold warning, at the brown notebook I'd finally managed to steal from her purse last month during another emergency hospital visit. "This is the last free one," I said quietly. The woman on the phone paused. "I'm sorry." "Nothing. Thank you." I hung up and opened my calendar. Christmas dinner was in 5 days. The restaurant my parents chose was exactly the kind of place that screamed, "Look at us." Crystal chandeliers dripped light over white tablecloths. The private room they'd reserved probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The set menu was $200 per person, 50 guests, a $10,000 dinner to showcase the perfect Chavez family. I arrived exactly on time. My mother looked past me to see if anyone important was watching, then gave me a tight smile. "You're here. Don't embarrass us tonight, Nicole." No hug, No greeting, just a warning. My father was already holding court near the bar, laughing too loud. Marissa floated through the room in a dress that cost more than she made in a month, accepting compliments like a princess at her own coronation. When she saw me, she did that air kiss thing, her lips never touching my cheek, her eyes already moving to someone more important behind me. I found my seat. The place card said Nicole, in elegant calligraphy positioned at the far end of the table, as far from the center as possible, without actually putting me in a different room. Pastor Mike from their church stood to say grace. Lord, thank you for this blessed family's generosity, for their open hearts, and their commitment to community. I watched my mother bow her head, the picture of humble piety. I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I folded my hands and stayed silent. The woman next to me, one of my mother's bridge club friends, turned with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And what do you do, dear?" The tone suggested she already knew the answer was disappointing. "I work in logistics," I said simply. "Oh," she patted my hand. "Well, steady work is important." Across the table, Marissa's coworker was gushing. "Your sister is so talented, she's going places. That marketing campaign she did last month, brilliant. The campaign Marissa had described to me in detail, asking for my advice, which she'd then presented as entirely her own idea. But I just smiled and sipped my wine. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "They're planning to ask you for $80,000 tonight, for Marissa's business investment. It's time." My heart rate didn't even spike. I'd been expecting something like this. I slipped my hand into my purse and touched the envelope I'd brought. Everything I needed was right there. Midway through the second course, my father stood up, clearing his throat for attention. "I have a special presentation to make tonight." He pulled out a small velvet box, and my stomach dropped. I knew that box. I'd seen it in my grandmother's jewelry drawer 100 times. He opened it with a flourish. Grandmother Elena's diamond ring caught the chandelier light, throwing rainbows across the table. "This ring belonged to my mother," Dad announced, "and tonight I'm giving it to the daughter who deserves it most. Marissa, come here, sweetheart." The table erupted in applause. I sat frozen. That ring was supposed to be mine. I'd read Grandmother Elena's will myself after she died. My diamond ring to Nicole, who has my strength. "Dad," I said quietly, "that was meant for me." He looked at me like I'd said something absurd. "You're mistaken, Nicole. This is for Marissa. She'll actually appreciate it." My mother leaned forward, her smile sharp as glass. "A successful daughter should wear successful things, don't you think?" The neighbor woman whispered, just loud enough for half the table to hear. "Well, Marissa is the pretty one?" Laughter rippled through the guests. Pastor Mike, catching my mother's eye, stood again. "You know, I've been thinking about gratitude lately, about people who take and take but never give back." His gaze landed on me, meaningful and heavy. "We should all be more grateful for what our families do for us." More knowing nods, more pitying looks in my direction. Marissa slipped the ring onto her finger, holding it up to catch the light, her smile triumphant. She didn't even glance at me. Then came the main course, and with it the final act of the performance. My father's voice cut through the conversation loud enough for everyone to hear. "Nicole, you're not even half your sister. Honestly, we'd hoped you'd amount to something by now." Marissa giggled behind her hand. My mother added her tone, dripping with false sympathy. "Some people never reach their potential. We've made peace with it." A man I didn't know, someone's husband, leaned toward me. "What did you say you do again?" "My nephew manages a Target. I could ask if they're hiring." He meant it kindly. That was the worst part. The whole table was looking at me now, some with pity, some with amusement, all of them thinking the same thing, poor Nicole, the family disappointment. I set down my wine glass very carefully. My hand was steady. I straightened in my chair, rolled my shoulders back, and felt something cold and certain settle into my chest. I'd spent 35 years making myself small for these people. Not tonight. I stood slowly. Every eye turned to me. The room went quiet. I looked at my father, then my mother, then swept my gaze across the entire table of guests who'd spent the evening pitying me. "Since I'm such a failure, I said, my voice clear and calm. "Perhaps someone can tell me who paid for this $10,000 dinner." The silence was absolute. My father's face went from red to white. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. Around the table, forks paused mid-air. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. Bank statements. All of them. 8 years of highlighted transfers printed and organized with the kind of precision I'd learned running a business. "Let me answer my own question," I said, my voice steady. "I paid for this dinner, just like I've paid for everything else." I opened the folder. "Shall we go through the numbers, because I've been keeping very careful records?" I started reading, date by date, amount by amount. Years 1 through 3, when I was barely surviving after being fired $15,000 annually. Mortgage payments when you were facing foreclosure, emergency medical bills, property tax arrears. I looked up. Every face was frozen, watching me. Years 4 through 8, after my business became successful, $73,000 annually. Pastor Mike's face had gone pale. The neighbor woman who'd pitied me 20 minutes ago had her hand over her mouth. "Let's break it down further, shall we? Mortgage $2,800 monthly for 96 months. That's $268,800. I heard someone gasp. "Dad's emergency surgery when you had no insurance, $47,000. Property tax arrears, $31,000. The credit card debts you defaulted on, that were going to court, $28,000. Car repairs, insurance, utilities, every single bill for 8 years. "Nicole," my father started. "$412,000, I said clearly. "That's what I've given you, while you called me a failure." Marissa had gone completely still, the diamond ring glinting on her finger like an accusation. I pulled out my phone, opened a photo. "And about this ring, Grandmother Elena's will stated very specifically, my diamond ring to Nicole, who has my strength. I have a copy of the original document. Would you like me to pass my phone around?" My mother finally spoke, her voice thin. "Nicole, you're making a scene." "No, Mother, I'm telling the truth. There's a difference." I reached back into the folder. "But that's not even the worst of it, is it? Let me tell you all a story about a 15-year-old girl who trusted her parents." My voice cracked slightly, the only break in my composure. "When I was a sophomore in high school, they asked me to sign some papers. Just routine stuff for the house, they said. You're helping the family." I held up a credit report. What I actually signed was a credit line application, using my Social Security number. $42,000 in debt opened in my name when I was a child. I didn't discover it until I was 27 and tried to buy my first home. I spent 3 years paying off my parents' fraud. Pastor Mike stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Frank Rosa, this is unconscionable. This is identity theft of a minor," a man I didn't know said loudly. He was clearly a lawyer, his voice carrying the weight of professional knowledge. "That's a federal crime." My father's face was now the color of old concrete. "We were going to pay it back, You never intended to pay it back," I said. "And you know how I know that." Before I could continue, Marissa stood up so suddenly her chair nearly tipped over. Her hands were shaking, her face streaked with tears. I hadn't seen her cry. "Nicole," she said, her voice breaking, "they did it to me too." The room went completely silent. Even I hadn't expected this. She pulled an envelope from her purse with trembling fingers. "They used my name to open 3 credit cards. Told me it was investing for my future. I found out 2 years ago when I tried to lease my own apartment. I owe $31,000. Her voice rose, years of fear spilling out. "They told me to stay quiet. Said they'd pay it off once you sent enough money. They said if I told you, you'd stop helping and we'd all be homeless. I was so scared." She looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in years. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you." I felt anger and sympathy war in my chest. "You were a victim too," I said quietly. Marissa pulled the ring off her finger, tried to hand it to me. "This was never mine. Nothing was ever really mine, was it?" "Keep it for now," I told her. "We'll sort this out later." But I wasn't done. I reached into my purse one more time and pulled out the brown leather notebook. My mother made a strangled sound and lunged for it, but I held it out of reach. Looking for this, I opened it to the first page and read aloud. Nicole Smart, obedient, will succeed. Plan use her income when she's 25 plus. Tell her it's family duty. I looked up. I was 8 years old when you wrote this. 8. The gasps around the table sounded like a wave breaking. I flipped to the back section. And here's the rest of the story. Casino receipts, betting slips, debt collection letters, $125,000 in gambling debt over 15 years. A man stood up pointing at my father. Frank, you told me you quit gambling in 2008. I lent you $5,000 in 2019. You said it was for medical bills. My father couldn't even look up. 80% of every dollar I sent went to paying off casino debts, I said. And Mother kept this notebook to manage both his addiction and my exploitation. You're taking this out of context, my mother tried weakly. I have 15 years of context in your own handwriting, I replied. Then something extraordinary happened. Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor who'd sat silent all evening, stood up shakily. Nicole, I'm so sorry. Your grandmother told me everything before she died. She asked me to witness her will to make sure you got what she wanted you to have. But after she passed, Frank and Rosa threatened to sue me. I was scared. I failed you. Then another voice. Mr. Rodriguez, my middle school teacher. They called my principal, demanded I tell you that grades didn't matter for girls like you. I refused, but I stayed silent when I saw how they treated you differently. I'm ashamed. One by one people stood, a family friend. I heard them joke about Nicole's money train at a barbecue last summer. Another neighbor. I knew something was wrong. We all knew. I looked around at all these people who'd seen and said nothing. My parents' carefully constructed image was crumbling, and even their own guests were stepping away. I placed one more envelope on the table. This contains the legal documents you should worry about most. My parents' hands visibly trembled. I opened the envelope slowly, giving them time to understand this was really happening. Inside was a letter on attorney letterhead. I read it aloud. Legal notice of termination of voluntary financial support, effective January 1st. I looked up. Starting next month, I will no longer be paying for anything. Not your mortgage, not your utilities, not your property taxes, nothing. My father found his voice. Where are we supposed to go? I met his eyes. Where did you expect me to go when I was 19, and you pushed me out? I figured it out. Now it's your turn. But the house? My mother started. The house that I own, I interrupted. 5 years ago you were facing foreclosure. I refinanced the mortgage in my name. I've paid 100% of it since then. The deed is in my name. You signed the paperwork yourselves, remember? You were so grateful for my help. The color drained from both their faces. I pulled out another document. Here's your option. You can stay in the house if you pay all the bills yourselves. Mortgage, utilities, property tax insurance, everything. You have 90 days to prove you can do it. If not, I sell the property and you find somewhere else to live. Nicole, please. My mother's voice broke. You planned my exploitation when I was 8 years old, I said quietly. I'm giving you 90 days' notice. That's more than fair. Marissa spoke up, her voice still shaky but determined. I'll help you find an apartment. I'm moving out too. I need to figure out my own life. Pastor Mike, who'd been standing near the exit, turned back. He looked at me with something like respect. You've been more than fair, Nicole, more than they deserved. Then he walked out and several other guests followed. But I wasn't finished. There was one more thing I needed to say. I want to announce something else. I waited until the remaining guests turned their attention back to me. I've established a scholarship foundation. It's called the Elena Chavez Foundation, named after my grandmother, the only person in this family who truly loved me. My voice softened, and I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time that night. The foundation will provide scholarships to young women who are undervalued or unsupported by their families, first-generation students, those dealing with family estrangement, survivors of financial abuse. I've funded it with $100,000 initially, and it will support 10 women annually. Several guests were crying openly now. One woman stood and started clapping, and others joined her. "My grandmother believed in me when no one else did," I said. "Now I'm going to help others the way she helped me. That's the legacy she deserves." Marissa crossed the room and stood beside me. "Can I volunteer with the foundation? I want to help. I need to do something good." I nodded, and she squeezed my hand. The dinner ended in a scattered, awkward way. Guests left quickly, some stopping to hug me, others avoiding my parents entirely. Within an hour, the private room was nearly empty. Marissa approached me as I gathered my things. She held out the diamond ring. "This was always yours." I took it, feeling the weight of it in my palm. As I looked at it more closely, I noticed something odd about the setting. The diamond seemed slightly loose. Curious, I twisted the stone gently, and to my shock, a tiny compartment opened beneath it. Inside was a rolled piece of paper so small I could barely unfold it, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My grandmother's careful script. "Nicole, if you're reading this, you found the truth. This ring was always meant for you, the one who will survive." Inside this note is information about a trust I created, Elena's Haven LLC. The trust holds my lake house in Oregon, coordinates 45.5152D Gun, 122.6784 DGW. You are the sole beneficiary. The trustee is Attorney Morrison. This key opens the front door. Property taxes paid through 2045. Go there when you need peace, mija. You earned it. Love, Abuela. Taped to the paper was a tiny brass key. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew everything." Marissa leaned over to see her eyes wide. "She protected you from beyond the grave." I couldn't speak. I just held the note and cried, really cried for the first time all evening. Outside, the winter air was sharp and clean. I walked to my car, still clutching the ring and the note. A man was waiting by the parking lot, distinguished and calm, maybe in his mid-60s. "Nicole Chavez?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Attorney Morrison, your grandmother's trustee." He handed me his card. "She hired me 17 years ago before she passed. She set up a protective trust with specific trigger conditions if you filed bankruptcy, if your parents were sued for fraud, or if you confronted them publicly. Tonight, you triggered the third condition." My legs felt weak. "She planned all this." "She described you at age 8 and predicted almost exactly what would happen. She hoped she was wrong, but she wanted you protected either way." He handed me a folder. "The lake house, the $50,000 Mrs. Ramirez gave you, it all came from the trust. There's still $150,000 remaining for whatever you need. Legal protection, startup capital, anything." "She gave me a way out," I said, my voice breaking. "She gave you a choice," Morrison corrected gently. "To fight or to walk away with dignity. You did both." I sat in my car for a long time, the folder on my passenger seat, the ring in my hand. I entered the coordinates into my phone. A lake house appeared on the map, surrounded by trees and water. A place I'd never known existed, a sanctuary my grandmother had built for me decades ago. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Tia told me to send this if you ever stood up tall. She was so proud of you." An audio file was attached. I pressed play, and Mrs. Ramirez's warm voice filled my car like a hug from the past. "Mija, your grandmother and I knew you'd survive them. Now go live, not just survive. The world needs your story. Tell it when you're ready." I sat there crying and laughing at the same time. Then I scrolled back to the text I'd received before dinner, the warning about my parents' plan, the unknown number. I typed, "About that story you mentioned, I think it's time the world knew." The response came immediately, "When you're ready, I'm listening." I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the restaurant and everything it represented behind me. In my rearview mirror, I could see my parents standing at the entrance looking small and lost. I whispered to the memory of my grandmother, to the ring on my finger, to the key that would unlock a home I'd never seen. "I kept your strength, Abuela, and I'm finally free." The road ahead was dark but clear, and somewhere in Oregon, a lake house was waiting. My inheritance wasn't pain anymore. It was peace, and I was finally going home. Nicole's story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is set boundaries with people who never respected you. She didn't seek revenge through cruelty. She simply stopped being the invisible ATM for people who called her a failure while living off her success. And in doing so, she found something more valuable than money: her freedom. Her grandmother's love reached across time itself, protecting her granddaughter even from the grave. That's the kind of legacy that matters. Not perfection, not wealth, but the courage to see someone's worth when the world refuses to. Elena saw Nicole's strength when she was just a little girl, and she made sure that strength would be protected when it mattered most. If Nicole's story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been the invisible one in your family? The person who gave everything, but received nothing in return? Or maybe you've witnessed this kind of family dynamic and wished someone had spoken up sooner. Drop a comment below and share your experience. Your story matters, and this community is here to listen. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like Nicole's stories about standing up, setting boundaries, and refusing to be diminished, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful true stories. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been made to feel small when they were always strong enough to walk away. Remember, you don't owe anyone your peace of mind, you don't owe anyone your financial security, and you certainly don't owe loyalty to people who planned your exploitation before you were old enough to understand what that meant. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to finally put yourself first. Thank you for listening to Nicole's story. I'll see you in the next one.